Grace Anderson had never felt more out of place than she did standing in the grand ballroom of the Rothmore Hotel, surrounded by crystal chandeliers and people wearing designer gowns that probably cost more than her annual salary as a librarian. She smoothed down the simple black dress she had borrowed from her sister, trying not to think about how the woman next to her was dripping in diamonds that caught the light with every movement. Her best friend Maya had convinced her to come to this charity gala, insisting that Grace needed to get out more, to experience something beyond the quiet comfort of books and dusty shelves. Now Grace was seriously reconsidering that friendship. "You look like you're about to bolt," Maya whispered, appearing at her elbow with 2 glasses of champagne. "Please tell me you're not going to abandon me here." Grace accepted the glass gratefully, taking a larger sip than was probably appropriate. "I just don't understand why I'm here. These people, they're all so accomplished and wealthy, and I'm just a small town librarian who helps kids find books about dinosaurs." "That's exactly why you should be here," Maya insisted. "You do important work, you matter, stop selling yourself short." Before Grace could respond, someone bumped into her from behind, causing her champagne to slosh dangerously close to the rim of her glass. She turned to find herself face to face with a man who made her breath catch in her throat. He was tall, easily over 6 feet, with dark hair that looked like he had run his fingers through it one too many times. His tuxedo fit him perfectly, emphasizing broad shoulders and a lean frame. But it was his eyes that held her attention, a striking blue-gray that seemed to see right through her. "I'm so sorry," he said immediately, his hand reaching out to steady her glass. "That was entirely my fault. Are you all right?" "I'm fine," Grace managed, acutely aware of how warm his hand felt where it briefly touched hers. "No harm done," he smiled, and she felt something flutter in her chest. "I'm Owen Nelson." The name sounded vaguely familiar, but she couldn't place it. "Grace Anderson." "It's nice to meet you, Grace. Are you enjoying the evening?" His voice was warm, genuinely interested, not the polite small talk she had been dreading all night. "Honestly, I feel completely out of my element," she admitted before she could stop herself. Maya had wandered off somewhere, leaving Grace alone with this handsome stranger. "I'm not exactly gala material." Owen's expression softened. "What makes you say that?" Grace gestured around the opulent ballroom. "Look at this place. Look at these people. I'm nobody special. I'm a children's librarian from a town most people have never heard of. I help organize story time and teach kids how to use the card catalog system. I don't belong here with all these important people doing important things." Something flickered across Owen's face, an emotion she couldn't quite read. "I think teaching children to love reading might be one of the most important jobs there is," he said quietly. "My mother was a librarian, actually. She passed away when I was 12, but I still remember how she used to bring home books she thought I'd like, how she'd stay up late reading with me even after long days at work." Grace felt her heart squeeze. "I'm so sorry for your loss. Thank you." Owen's smile was sad but genuine. "She would have loved meeting someone like you. Can I get you another drink? Maybe some of those hors d'oeuvres that are far too fancy for their own good." Grace found herself laughing. "Are they really that fancy?" One of them had edible gold leaf on it. Gold leaf. Owen's expression was so comically serious that Grace laughed harder. "Come on, let me introduce you to the absurdity that is gala food." For the next hour, Grace forgot about feeling out of place. Owen stayed by her side, making her laugh with dry observations about the pretentiousness surrounding them, while simultaneously showing genuine kindness to everyone they encountered. He asked her about her work, and actually listened as she told him about the summer reading program she had developed, how she had managed to increase youth participation by 40% through partnerships with local schools and community centers. He seemed fascinated by her stories about helping struggling readers discover books that open new worlds for them. "You have no idea how much of an impact you make," Owen said seriously, as they stood near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The librarian who helped me after my mother died, she saved me in a lot of ways. She understood that I needed escape, adventure, hope. She gave me all of that through books. What did you end up doing? Grace asked, realizing she had talked so much about herself but knew almost nothing about him. What's your story? Owen hesitated, and Grace saw something guarded enter his expression. I run a company. It's not nearly as interesting as what you do. What kind of company? Manufacturing and distribution, mostly. It's boring corporate stuff. He changed the subject smoothly. Tell me more about this town you're from. You said most people haven't heard of it. Grace let him redirect the conversation, sensing he didn't want to talk about work. She told him about Riverside, a small town 2 hours north of the city, where everyone knew everyone and the biggest excitement was usually the annual Harvest Festival. She told him about her tiny apartment above the bakery, where she woke up to the smell of fresh bread every morning. She told him about her family, her parents who ran a hardware store, her sister who was a nurse, her brother who taught high school math. It sounds perfect, Owen said, and there was such longing in his voice that Grace looked at him curiously. You say that like you've never experienced it. I haven't, not really. I grew up in boarding schools, then college, then straight into working 80-hour weeks building a business. He looked out at the glittering city below. I have everything money can buy, but sometimes I wonder what I'm missing. Grace felt bold suddenly, maybe from the champagne or maybe from the way Owen looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Connection, community, the things that actually matter. Exactly. Owen turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his gaze made her pulse quicken. Grace, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I haven't enjoyed talking to someone this much in years. Would you consider having dinner with me sometime, away from all this? He gestured at the gala around them. Grace's heart raced. You want to have dinner with me? Why? Because you're genuine. You're passionate about what you do. You made me laugh more tonight than I have in months. Because when you talk about the kids you help, your whole face lights up. Owen took a small step closer. Because I feel like I can actually breathe around you. Yes, Grace said before she could overthink it. Yes, I'd like that. Owen's smile was brilliant. Tomorrow, I could drive up to Riverside if that's easier for you. You drive 2 hours for dinner, Grace. I'd drive a lot farther than that. They exchanged numbers, and Grace felt like she was floating for the rest of the evening. Maya found her eventually, eyes wide with barely suppressed excitement. Do you have any idea who that was? Maya hissed as they collected their coats. That was Owen Nelson, as in Nelson Industries. As in one of the wealthiest men in the state, as in the Owen Nelson. Grace felt the bottom drop out of her stomach. What? Owen Nelson. His company is worth billions. He's on the cover of business magazines. Grace, he's a legitimate billionaire. Maya was practically bouncing. And he spent the entire evening talking to you. Grace's mind reeled. Suddenly, his vague comments about his company made sense. The way people had deferred to him, how the gala organizers had approached him with such reverence. She had been talking to a billionaire like he was just a regular person, had told him she was nobody special. Her phone buzzed with a text. I'm already counting down the hours until I see you tomorrow. Sleep well, Grace. She stared at the message, her emotions a chaotic swirl. Part of her wanted to run, to cancel, to retreat back to her safe, predictable life. But another part, the part that had felt so alive talking with Owen, wanted to see where this could lead. What are you going to do? Maya asked. Grace thought about Owen's eyes, the way he had talked about his mother, how he had seemed genuinely interested in every word she said. I'm going to give him a chance. The next evening, Grace changed outfits 4 times before settling on a simple blue dress that her sister insisted brought out her eyes. She had told Owen to meet her at Riverside's only nice restaurant, a family-owned Italian place that had been around for generations. She arrived early, nerves making her hands shake slightly as she waited at their table. Owen walked in exactly on time, and Grace's breath caught. He wore dark jeans and a gray sweater that somehow made him look both more casual and more attractive than his tuxedo had. His face lit up when he saw her and he crossed the restaurant in long strides. "Hi," he said, slightly breathless. "You look beautiful." "Thank you." Grace tried to calm her racing heart. "You look good too." They sat down, and there was a moment of awkward silence before they both started talking at once, then laughed. The tension broke, and suddenly it felt like the night before, easy and natural. They ordered food, and Owen asked the owner about the restaurant's history, genuinely interested in the family photos on the walls and the stories behind signature dishes. "My friend told me who you are," Grace said finally, after they had finished their appetizers. Owen Nelson of Nelson Industries. Owen's expression became carefully neutral. "Does that change things?" "I don't know," Grace admitted honestly. "It's a lot to process. Last night I thought you were just a nice guy at a gala. Now I find out you're what, a billionaire." "Multi-millionaire technically, though the company valuation puts us in the billion range," Owen said, then winced. "Sorry, that sounded incredibly pretentious. Yes, I have a lot of money. But Grace, everything I told you last night was true. I meant every word." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because for the first time in a decade, someone was talking to me like I was just a person. Not Owen Nelson, the CEO, not the guy who could write a big check, just Owen." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "Do you know how rare that is? How exhausting it is to wonder if people like you for who you are or what you can do for them." Grace understood that more than he might realize. "When I was in college, I briefly dated a guy who only stayed with me because he wanted me to help him cheat in our literature classes. When I found out and broke up with him, he told me I should be grateful anyone paid attention to a boring girl like me." Owen's jaw tightened. He was an idiot, maybe, but it made me careful about trusting people's motives. Grace met his eyes. "So I need you to be honest with me." "What do you want from this, from me? Honestly, I don't know yet." Owen's vulnerability was stark. "I just know that talking with you feels right in a way nothing has felt right in a long time. I want to get to know you better. I want to take you to dinner, to meet your friends, to hear more about your work. I want to figure out what this could be." He paused. "And I want you to get to know me too, the real me, not the CEO version." Grace considered this, turning it over in her mind. "Okay," she said finally. "But we take this slow, no rushing, no pressure, just two people getting to know each other." Relief flooded Owen's face. "I can do slow." They spent the rest of dinner talking about everything and nothing. Owen told her about growing up lonely, despite having everything money could buy, about his father who built Nelson Industries from the ground up, but had little time for his son. Grace shared her own stories of a loud, chaotic childhood full of love and laughter, of parents who supported every dream even when money was tight. "My dad cried when I got the job at the library," Grace said softly. "Not because it was prestigious or high-paying, but because he knew it was exactly what I wanted. He told me he was proud of me for choosing happiness over a big salary." "Your parents sound amazing," Owen said, and Grace heard the longing in his voice. "They'd like you," she found herself saying. "My dad has a soft spot for anyone who treats people with respect regardless of who they are." "Does that mean I get to meet them someday?" Grace felt warmth spread through her chest. "Maybe, if you play your cards right." Owen insisted on walking her back to her apartment, and they took the long way, strolling through Riverside's quiet downtown. Grace pointed out landmarks, the library where she worked, the park where they held summer concerts, the coffee shop that made the best lattes in a 100-mile radius. "It's so peaceful here," Owen said, looking around with genuine appreciation. "I can see why you love it." They stopped in front of the bakery and Grace turned to face him. "Thank you for dinner and for being honest. Thank you for giving me a chance." Owen reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The gesture was tender, intimate, and Grace felt heat flood through her. "Can I see you again soon? I'd like that." They stood there for a moment, close enough that Grace could smell his cologne, something woodsy and clean. She thought he might kiss her, and part of her desperately wanted him to. But instead, Owen stepped back with visible reluctance. "Slow," he reminded himself, and Grace laughed. Slow, she agreed. Over the next several weeks, Owen drove up to Riverside every chance he got. They fell into a pattern of dinners, long walks, and comfortable silences. Grace learned that Owen was wickedly smart, with a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh until her sides hurt. She learned that he worked too hard, often forgetting to eat meals, and that he had a surprising sweet tooth that rivaled any child's. She learned that he was generous but private about it, preferring to help people quietly rather than seeking recognition. Owen learned that Grace was stubborn when she believed in something, that she cried during sad movies but pretended she wasn't, and that she had an infectious love of learning that made him see the world differently. He sat in on one of her story times at the library, watching with fascination as she brought characters to life for a group of enraptured children. Afterward, a little girl named Sophie had tugged on his sleeve. "Miss Grace is the best," Sophie had whispered conspiratorially. "She makes all the voices different. She is pretty special, isn't she?" Owen had whispered back, and when he looked up, Grace was watching them with such soft affection that his heart had nearly stopped. Their first kiss happened on a Wednesday evening, 6 weeks after they met. Owen had surprised Grace by showing up at the library right as she was closing, holding takeout from her favorite Chinese restaurant. "I had a late meeting nearby and couldn't resist," he explained, though Grace strongly suspected he had moved his meeting specifically to be near Riverside. They ate in the library's reading nook, surrounded by books and the comfortable quiet that Grace loved. Owen told her about a difficult negotiation he had been managing, and Grace listened, asking questions that showed she understood more about business than he had given her credit for. "You should meet my CFO," Owen said. "You just identified the same issue she's been trying to convince me about for weeks." "I read a lot," Grace said simply, "including business books. Just because I chose not to pursue a corporate career doesn't mean I don't understand it." Owen looked at her with such admiration that Grace felt her cheeks heat. "You're incredible, you know that." "I'm really not," Grace started to say, but Owen cut her off. "Yes, you are, Grace. You're brilliant and kind and passionate. You make me want to be better, to do more meaningful work." He moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You make me feel like I'm finally living instead of just existing." "Owen," Grace breathed, and then his lips were on hers. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, a question and answer all at once. Then Grace's hands found their way to Owen's shoulders and he pulled her closer, the kiss deepening. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Owen rested his forehead against hers. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he admitted. "Me too," Grace whispered. Their relationship deepened after that. Owen started staying in Riverside on weekends, getting a room at the town's small bed and breakfast. Grace's parents invited him to Sunday dinner, and Grace watched nervously as her father grilled Owen about everything from his intentions to his opinion on local politics. But Owen handled it with grace, treating her parents with genuine respect and interest. By the end of the evening, her father was showing Owen his workshop and her mother was packing leftovers for him to take. "He's a good man," her father told Grace later. "Doesn't matter how much money he has. What matters is how he treats people, especially you." "He treats me really well, Dad." "Good. He better, or he'll have me to answer to." Grace's integration into Owen's world was more challenging. She attended a business dinner with him in the city and found herself subjected to subtle condescension from several of the other guests. One woman, a sharply dressed executive named Catherine, was particularly dismissive. "A librarian," Catherine said, her tone making it clear what she thought of that profession. "How quaint. Owen, I'm surprised you're not dating someone more in line with your lifestyle." Owen's expression hardened. "Grace is more intelligent, accomplished, and genuinely good than anyone else in this room. Her work has more positive impact on the world than most corporate jobs ever will. So if you have a problem with her profession, you have a problem with me." The woman had backed off quickly, but Grace had felt shaken by the encounter. On the drive back to Riverside, she was quiet, lost in thought. "I'm sorry about Catherine," Owen said finally. She was completely out of line. She's not wrong, though, Grace said softly. Owen, we live in completely different worlds. You attend galas and business dinners. You run a multi-million-dollar company. I organize story time and help people find books. How is this supposed to work long-term? Owen pulled the car over, turning to face her in the dim light. Grace, look at me. I don't care about any of that. Yes, I have money and responsibilities. But none of it means anything without someone to share it with. You make me happy. You make me laugh. You remind me what's important in life. He took her hand. I'm falling in love with you. Actually, I think I started falling in love with you the moment you told me you were nobody special, because it showed me you had no idea how extraordinary you really are. Grace felt tears prick her eyes. I'm falling in love with you too. That's what scares me. What if your world won't accept me? What if I can't fit into your life? Then we make a new life, one that works for both of us. Owen was fierce now, determined. Grace, I built a company from nearly nothing after my father died. I can figure this out too if you're willing to try. I'm willing, Grace whispered and kissed him. 3 months into their relationship, Owen asked Grace to go away with him for a weekend. He had rented a cabin in the mountains, private and secluded, just the two of them. Grace agreed, and they spent 3 perfect days hiking, cooking together, and talking about their futures. On the last evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Owen grew serious. I've been thinking a lot about what you said about our different worlds, and I've made some decisions. Grace's stomach clenched nervously. What kind of decisions? I'm restructuring the company. I've been too hands-on, trying to control every aspect because I was afraid to trust anyone else. But I have brilliant people working for me, including my CFO Sarah, who's more than capable of handling day-to-day operations. Owen took Grace's hand. I'm going to step back from the constant travel and late nights. I want to be present in my life, in our life, if you'll have me. Owen, I don't want you to give up your company for me. I'm not giving it up. I'm finding balance. There's a difference. Owen's thumb traced circles on her palm. Grace, I want to build something real with you. That means making changes, prioritizing what matters. You matter more than any business deal. Grace felt overwhelmed by emotion. I want that too, but Owen, I can't leave Riverside, the library, my community. It's part of who I am. I know. And I'm not asking you to leave. Owen smiled. Actually, I was thinking about opening a regional office here. Riverside is close enough to several of our distribution centers that it makes logistical sense. I could work from here most of the time, only going to the city when necessary. You'd move here, to Riverside? If you're here, that's where I want to be. Grace threw her arms around him, kissing him deeply. Yes, she said between kisses. Yes to all of it. Yes to building a life together. Owen pulled back just enough to look into her eyes. I love you, Grace Anderson. You've changed my entire world. I love you too, Grace said, and meant it with her whole heart. The next several months were a whirlwind of changes. Owen was true to his word, restructuring Nelson Industries to allow for more remote work and delegation. He purchased a beautiful old Victorian house on the outskirts of Riverside and began renovating it, asking for Grace's input on every decision. Grace slowly began to understand the scope of Owen's wealth and influence. But he remained the same man she had fallen in love with, the one who showed up for library events and helped her shelve books and remembered the names of all the children in her programs. Grace also began to see how she could use Owen's resources to make a real difference. Together, they established a foundation focused on literacy and library funding, providing grants to underfunded libraries across the region. Grace took the lead on the foundation's direction, and Owen supported her vision completely. Watching her present their first round of grants, Owen felt his chest swell with pride and love. Not everything was smooth. There were difficult conversations about finances, about the reality of their different backgrounds, about what their future would look like. Grace struggled sometimes with the attention that came with dating someone as wealthy and prominent as Owen. Owen struggled with learning to step back from work, to trust others with the company he had built. But they worked through each challenge together, learning to communicate, to compromise, to support each other's dreams and fears. Grace introduced Owen to the simple pleasures of small-town life, of community potlucks and local traditions. Owen showed Grace that wealth could be a tool for good, that his resources could amplify the work she was already doing. 1 year after they met, Owen took Grace back to the Rothmore Hotel for another charity gala. Grace was less nervous this time, more confident in her place at Owen's side. She wore a beautiful emerald green dress that Owen had insisted on buying for her, and she had to admit she felt elegant. "I have something for you," Owen said as they stood near the same windows where they had first talked. He pulled out a small velvet box, and Grace's heart began to race. "Grace, a year ago you told me you were nobody special. You had no idea that you were about to become my everything." He opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring. "You've made me happier than I ever thought possible. You've shown me what really matters in life. You've made me want to be the man you see when you look at me." Owen dropped to one knee, and Grace's vision blurred with tears. "Grace Anderson, will you marry me?" "Yes," Grace said, her voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Owen stood and slipped the ring on her finger, then kissed her as applause broke out around them. Grace laughed through her tears, overwhelmed by joy and love and the sheer impossibility of her life. "I never expected this," she said, looking up at Owen. "Any of this." "Neither did I," Owen admitted, cupping her face in his hands. "But I'm so grateful I bumped into you." "Best accident ever," Grace agreed and kissed him again. They were married 6 months later in Riverside's small community church, surrounded by family and friends. Grace's parents walked her down the aisle, both crying openly. Owen's best man was surprisingly Jake, the son of his former housekeeper, a young man Owen had quietly put through college and who now worked in Nelson Industries' marketing department. Grace's sister was her maid of honor, and several of the children from the library served as flower girls and ring bearers. The ceremony was simple, but heartfelt. Owen's vows made everyone cry, especially when he promised to always see her as the extraordinary woman she was, even when she couldn't see it herself. Grace promised to remind him daily about the things that mattered, to keep him grounded and loved. The reception was held at Owen's Victorian house, now their Victorian house, with its spacious gardens and wrap-around porch. Grace's mother had coordinated with the town's best caterers, and the result was a perfect blend of elegance and comfort. Owen danced with Grace under string lights, holding her close as soft music played. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "Ridiculously happy," Grace confirmed. "You, more than I have words for." Owen pulled back to look at her, his eyes full of love. "Thank you for taking a chance on me." "Thank you for seeing me," Grace replied. Their first year of marriage was an adventure in learning to build a life together. Owen thrived working from Riverside, discovering that he was more productive and creative with a better work-life balance. Grace continued her work at the library while also expanding the foundation's reach. They traveled together, finding joy in both luxurious vacations and simple road trips. They hosted dinners for friends, combining Owen's business contacts with Grace's community connections in ways that bridged their different worlds. Grace also helped Owen reconnect with parts of himself he had lost. They visited his mother's grave together, and Grace held him as he cried for the first time in years. They tracked down the librarian who had helped him as a child, and Owen was able to thank her for her kindness. Grace watched as Owen slowly let go of the loneliness and isolation that had defined so much of his life. Owen helped Grace see herself more clearly too. He celebrated every success at the library, from successful programs to grants they secured. He framed articles about the foundation's work and hung them in his office. He introduced her to people as his brilliant wife, never diminishing her accomplishments or making her feel less than. With Owen, Grace finally began to believe she was special. 2 years after their wedding, Grace discovered she was pregnant. Owen's reaction was priceless, a mixture of shock, joy, and terror that made Grace laugh until she cried. They spent the pregnancy preparing the nursery, reading every parenting book they could find and arguing good-naturedly about names. Their daughter was born on a spring morning, with dark hair like Owen's and green eyes like Grace's. They named her Eleanor after Owen's mother, and she was perfect. Owen held her with such reverence and love that Grace fell in love with him all over again. "She's going to have the childhood I never did," Owen said softly, watching Eleanor sleep, full of love and stability and parents who are present. "She's also going to grow up surrounded by books," Grace added with a smile. "I've already started her library card application," Owen laughed. "Of course you have." Parenthood suited them both. Owen proved to be a devoted father, involved and attentive despite his business responsibilities. Grace balanced work and motherhood with characteristic determination, bringing Eleanor to the library for story times and foundation meetings in equal measure. Their house filled with the chaos and joy of family life. When Eleanor was 2, they had a son they named Henry, who inherited his mother's stubborn determination and his father's analytical mind. Their family felt complete, their Victorian house filled with laughter, love, and the constant presence of books. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Owen surprised Grace with a trip back to the Rothmore Hotel. They dressed formally, recreating their first meeting, and attended another charity gala. This time, Grace moved through the room with confidence, comfortable in her role as Owen's partner and as a co-director of their foundation. "Remember when you told me you were nobody special?" Owen asked as they stood by their favorite windows. "I was so naive," Grace said with a laugh. "I had no idea what was coming." "I knew," Owen said, pulling her close. "The moment I met you, I knew you were going to change my life. I just didn't realize how completely." He kissed her forehead. "You made me believe in love and family, in building a life that has meaning beyond profit margins and business deals. You gave me everything I didn't know I needed." Grace looked up at him, her heart full. "You did the same for me. You showed me that being ordinary could be extraordinary, that the life I was living mattered. You made me believe I was worth loving." She touched his face tenderly. "You made me your everything, and somehow in the process, you became mine too." They kissed as the city sparkled below them, 2 people who had found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Grace sometimes still couldn't believe this was her life, that the handsome billionaire who had bumped into her at a gala had become her husband, the father of her children, her partner in every sense of the word. But it was real as the love they shared and the family they had built. Grace Anderson Nelson was nobody special, just a small-town librarian who loved books and helping people. She was also extraordinary, loved beyond measure, and living a life more beautiful than any story she had ever read. And she knew, looking into Owen's eyes as they swayed to the music, that this was just the beginning of their happily ever after. Years later, when their children asked how they met, Owen and Grace would tell them the story of the gala, of champagne and confessions and seeing each other truly from the very first moment. They would tell them about taking chances and building bridges between different worlds. They would tell them that love wasn't about where you came from or what you had, but about finding someone who saw you completely and loved you anyway. And when Eleanor and Henry grew up, they would carry with them their mother's love of learning and their father's determination to use their privileges for good. They would understand that being special wasn't about wealth or status, but about kindness, purpose, and love. They would know, because their parents showed them every single day, that the most extraordinary life was one lived with authenticity, compassion, and someone who made you believe in yourself. Grace never forgot what it felt like to stand in that ballroom feeling out of place, just as Owen never forgot the loneliness of his life before Grace. Those memories kept them grateful, kept them grounded, and kept them fighting for others who felt unseen or undervalued. Together, they made a difference in their community and beyond, proving that when love and purpose combined, anything was possible on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and the house was peaceful. Owen and Grace would sit together and marvel at the life they had built. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges and difficult days, but it was theirs. Built on honesty, trust, and a love that had started with a chance meeting and grown into something neither of them could have imagined. Grace Anderson had walked into that gala convinced she was nobody special. She walked out having met the man who would spend the rest of his life proving her wrong, showing her daily that she was everything. And Owen Nelson, who had everything money could buy but nothing that mattered, found in Grace the one thing that made it all worthwhile, a love that transformed his entire world. Their story was proof that sometimes the best things in life came from unexpected moments, from taking chances, and from believing that love could bridge any divide. It was proof that being seen, truly seen, by another person was the most powerful gift anyone could receive. And it was proof that happily ever after wasn't just for fairy tales. It was for two people willing to build it together, one day, one moment, one choice at a time.